If the Blue Jackets are unable to get Macklin Celebrini in the 2024 draft, is Ivan Demidov a pretty good consolation prize? We're talking about that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. Now, today, actually, before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. I've already said that. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app, use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. So, like I said at the top of the show, today we're talking all about Ivan Demidov. Very, very fun Russian winger. If the Blue Jackets have enough centers right now, which they might not, if they miss out on Macklin Celebrini, Ivan Demidov could be a good pick for them. So I sat down with Sebastian High of Dobber Prospect and one half of Locked On NHL Prospects, and we talked a little bit about his game, how he could fit with the Blue Jackets, and how fun a player he is. So I'm just going to get right into my conversation with Sebastian. So the Blue Jackets might be in the market for a winger at the draft this year. And I hear there's a guy out there that might be doing even better than last year's star Russian winger. So I've got Sebastian High here, and we're going to talk a little bit about Ivan Demidov, because this is a name that I've been hearing all the way through to last year's draft, right? Is, okay, well, Michkov is good, but guys, watch out for Demidov. So what exactly, Sebastian, is so enticing about Demidov as a player that's making people say, hey, he's doing things that Michkov wasn't doing?
It's interesting with Demidov. He represents pure flair for fans seeking excitement in their lineup. He is certainly one of the most interesting prospects in this draft class. Like, he has been a staple at second overall on my board, going all the way back to July, and he hasn't budged from there. He hasn't exactly budged Celebrini from the number one slot yet either, but that you can hardly fault him for that. Demidov is a player who exemplifies skill. He is tremendously adaptable on his feet. He's far from a conventional skater, but he uses his inside edges so much that he's constantly like in a rotating movement, which allows him to adapt to every single contact or unexpected obstacle that he ends up encountering, which makes him so much more escapable in tight area scenarios than really any other prospect that I've personally seen in the last like 2 or 3 drafts. Like, he is quite exceptional in that maneuverability, and on top of that, he also has the best handling skill that I've seen in the last like 4 drafts. He is a tremendous puck handler, and it is electrifying to watch, especially at the MHL level of Russian junior hockey, which offers players, especially skilled players, a lot of time and space to execute their plays, and that's really been where Demidov's played this entire season, because SK St. Petersburg just for some reason hates playing their hyper skilled young wingers. Like, Michkov's in the same organization, and he always gets shipped out to Sochi to just like become a KHL all-star there rather than in St. Petersburg. But it has also allowed Demidov to really lean into the skill this season. Like, he's still quite raw. Like, he has a lot more defensive abilities than Matvei Michkov did last season, and he's far more of a playmaker heavy than a goal scorer heavy player than Michkov. But he's a fascinating one. I think that he's going to fall down the draft board in a similar fashion to Matvei Michkov, hopefully a bit less extremely, like all the way down to 7th. But he is certainly a player that is going to be putting teams off because of just how skilled he is. But he, as I said, is genuinely still quite a raw player, and I can understand why teams would be a bit hesitant, but the upside here is rivaled only by Macklin Celebrini in this draft class, and even that is really tight. I think that the high-end upside for Demidov as a player in the NHL, like we are talking Kucherov level talent, and that is like also considering that Kucherov's on pace for a career 138 point pace season this year, which is not bad. And Demidov profiles in a fairly similar way. And currently, Ivan Demidov has 20 goals and 45 points in 23 MHL games, which is outpacing D+1 Nikita Kucherov. When he was genuinely just absolutely popping off. That's when he really made his mark as an elite level prospect, as a D+1 player. And even compared to that, Demidov is pacing ahead of him as a draft eligible. And he's a bit older for the draft class. He's a December 10th birthday, which is only 3 months into the draft age cycle. But you usually see the older players in these draft years that kind of get those earlier shots at pro hockey, which Demidov has gotten, but it's really been in small flashes. So he started the season off in the KHL this year, got into 4 games, was playing more minutes than were given to Matvei Michkov before Michkov got shipped out to Sochi, but he was quite promptly demoted back to the MHL as well, which has been entertaining. It's fun to watch him play in the MHL because he just goes banana, crazy mode. He's insane. He's insane for the MHL. He goes bananas. He loves the space he has there, but he's not being challenged to really process the game faster, which is really what he needs for his development to be accelerated at the moment, which is, I think, why you're seeing some people be a little bit hesitant about just how long he's been stuck in Russian junior hockey. But he's a fascinating player with an amazing toolkit who is in a very, very unique position right now as a prospect.
In a minute, we're going to get back to Sebastian and my conversation with him about Ivan Demidov. But first, I've got to tell you guys about Sleeper, because we're over halfway through the season right now, and the Blue Jackets have underperformed, I think. But regardless of whether they're underperforming or overperforming, you can overperform with Sleeper by playing daily fantasy hockey. They are the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. They're our number one choice for daily fantasy sports because you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests with Sleeper. All you have to do is pick whether guys like David, Crosby, McKinnon, Matthews will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your money on Sleeper, all you need to do is correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me right, Blue Jackets fans. You can win 100 times your money with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See terms of use for details. Is that a worry that he's kind of, obviously he's, popping off against other Russian junior players, but I don't think it's the same situation as like a Jordan DeMay, for example, who we're questioning, okay, he's doing this against this competition. Can he take a step to the next level? Is there concerns with Demidov as well that, not to the same extent, but is there a concern that we'll see him maybe step up to the KHL and struggle when he's playing against, slightly tougher competition? Or is that something that you think, okay, he'll take a minute to adjust and then he'll adjust and just, again, continue to make teams miserable at that level as well?
I'm not too worried. I've watched every minute of KHL hockey that he's played this season, which has not been all that much. It's certainly been 4 very short viewings, but it's been quite solid. I've liked what I've seen from Demidov. The one thing that I think separates Demidov from Michkov in terms of making him a bit easier to project to pro hockey, and which is still kind of weird to say because Michkov is dominating pro hockey on a production basis already in the KHL. But what makes him more translatable to the NHL style and the smaller ice surface and the higher intensity and the higher physicality and the defensive work that wingers really have to do in the NHL to not get benched repeatedly unless you're really in the top 1% of elite skill in the league, which Demidov could be. is that Demidov has a level of defensive engagement that Michkov just still does not have to this day. He isn't the most defensively aware or sound player in the world. Certainly, he's not going to win a Selke, but what he does have is a desire to make plays defensively, to create turnovers, to get the counterattack launched. He's not the same style of cherry picker that Michkov is, in terms of waiting for his teammates to free the puck up, and then he's going to go straight up the ice trying to create things immediately. Demidov is a bit more systematic in his approach of, okay, first let's focus on getting the turnover, then we can build up play in transition, and then we'll get installed in the offensive zone, then I can go to work. It's a very much like it's a process for him, where for Michkov it's very much waiting for the destination, which has also like Michkov has developed that area of his game a decent amount in the last year, but it's still there. With Demidov, there's less of that anxiety for me personally. I know some other public scouts that I've talked to about Demidov kind of share that ease in ranking him like around the second or third overall range in this draft, because he does have that level of engagement. He's a very low center of gravity. He has a propension of really bouncing off of contact. Like he's a bit like a bumper card out there because of how maneuverable he is. He's always able to adjust the center of gravity and protect his balance. That even when he gets shoved and stuff, he really bounces off quite well, and or is able to turn off that contact and leverage it against his opponent. He's a lot more proactive on a physical standpoint in the middle of the ice. Along the boards, Matvei Michkov is a lot more like probably tenacious in flashes than Demidov has been in my viewings. But in terms of the overall toolkit that is actually used in most NHL games and on a most consistent basis, Demidov has a far better foundation, which makes me a lot more comfortable with kind of keeping him up there in the top end conversation of this draft class. The anxieties come more towards like how he produces his offense, which is completely leaning into the massive advantages he has. He completely leans into the hypermobility. Again, really, really weird skater. He's so not conventional. So hypermobility might not be quite the way of putting it, but the way that he's so adaptable as a skater and is just so capable of retaining his balance. He's so agile. He's so balanced. All of that, I think, makes him a really, really intriguing offensive bet as a player. But yeah, he's fascinating. I could ramble on for ages because he's a type of player that makes me excited enough to just like start babbling on and on about, because like I've thoroughly enjoyed every viewing I've had. And again, the concerns are very much in just how he creates the offense, because it's a little bit flashes of like pond hockey style, like we saw with Andrew Crystal last season, where it's kind of just like, I can do it at this level, so I am. Without perhaps integrating all the habits that will make that more sustainable at higher levels of competition. But it's so much fun to watch, so I really can't complain too much.
Honestly, everything you've told me so far makes me feel like it's an extremely on-brand Blue Jackets draft pick, because we kind of saw this with Kent Johnson specifically. I'm thinking is that the Blue Jackets draft skill and then figure the rest out. And it seems like as a draft strategy, it's working for them. So I could see them saying, "Hey, this kid's stupid talented. Let's grab him." And then I guess the next question for me would be, do you expect a similar kind of trajectory as Michkov? As well, he's signed in the KHL for the next, is it 3 seasons? I think Michkov is signed for. Is Demidov signed long term as well? Is it an
I believe he's only
expectation that
signed
it'll
for
be a few years until he makes the move to North America?
I think it's 1 or 2 years after this one that he's signed. That right now wouldn't be my biggest concern. I mean, I found it fascinating last year that everyone was bringing up this as like a major concern with Michkov, but with no other Russian, and like both Simashev and Daniil Boot were drafted top 11 by the Coyotes, and like no one even like ever mentioned contract situations as even a factor with them. Like with Michkov, I stood by the take that I think that the contract situation, if anything, heightens his value, because it forces him to just like go marinate for the next 3 seasons after being drafted and really refine the toolkit while also still leaning into the skill. And then he's coming over as a almost 22-year-old on a 3-year ELC. You're getting a 22 to 25-year or 21 to 24-year-old Matvei Michkov on a $1 million a year ELC, which is, in my view, a massive luxury for the Philadelphia Flyers to add. With Demidov, it's not as long of a contract, so there's even less stress with that. Of course, there's always new rules and regulations shifting on in the KHL, wanting to retain players for longer. But as of right now, with the sense I have in the scouting sphere more broadly, that would not be a concern with Demidov specifically in this draft year.
Always good to know. Although, again, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be waiting for a player at least a couple of years anyway. So I think, I don't know. I have no real fear about that. I think it's very similar to, you draft a kid from college. He's probably going back. Look at what Owen Power did, which no one was expecting. And I think his game was the better for it. So I'm not if we draft this kid and he doesn't immediately come over to North America, it's a waste of a pick. But it is reassuring to know that his contract is slightly less long than Michkov. We're going to finish off our conversation with Sebastian in a minute about Demidov, but first I'm going to tell you guys about FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite snacks. That's the most important bit. Snacks is the most important bit. The second most important bit is winning a little bit of money, and FanDuel has so many ways for you to win with Super Bowl. You can bet on who's going to win. You can bet on which players are going to score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. Plus, new customers join today. You're going to get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and also us, the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's finish up here. The Blue Jackets are probably going to be drafting in that 2 to 5 range again because they hate me specifically and want me to suffer. Demidov is probably going to be available there. Is this a pick that the Blue Jackets should make? And if it's not, who would you have them? If we, let's say that I think they're 4th in the draft ranking at the minute. Let's say they're picking 4th overall. Is Demidov available? Should they pick him? And if not, is there anyone that you're like, hey, they should pick this dude at 4, definitely?
That guy would be Demidov, probably. I think he would be my personal favorite pick. If the Blue Jackets came and rang my phone number, we're like, for some reason we want you specifically and only you to make our draft selection here at 4th overall, and Demidov is on the board. I'm picking Ivan Demidov. I think the only other player that right now I'd really not love to pass up on would be a player like Zane Parekh, for instance, but he's going to fall to that 10 to 15 range. So I'd rather just trade up into that range and try to get both. But Demidov is the player that I think will get you the most bang for your buck of potential payoff in terms of the draft selection spot. In terms of skills, isn't unless they're undersized Russian wingers, you don't get this type of skill available past 3 in many drafts at all. And I think with Demidov in Columbus specifically, but honestly any NHL team, when you have the opportunity to add a player of his caliber, of his skill set, of being potentially among the 5 or 10 most dynamic hockey players in the world at his peak, you don't really want to miss out on it. I think you have a bunch of options this year. I think that Demidov is part of a larger tier. I don't think he stands alone as the only player that's worth picking at once Celebrini is off the board. I think there's quite a few names in there that are really fun. As I mentioned, Parekh. I think Sam Dickinson is really solid. We're seeing the emergence of players like Zeev Buium into top 10s. You have a lot of really, really solid players that are kind of in a similar range and are all over the place in the rankings as a result, because everyone has slightly varying opinions of them. But Demidov's the one that I'd be very, very confident with. And I mean, with Columbus, you already have, the future of the blue line should be solid if David Jiricek were being developed correctly. But
listen.
Yeah. It should be solid. With Matejka coming in, and there's so many bodies that are already NHLers in Columbus on the blue line. I don't see a need to reach on a defenseman, and the defensemen that are going to be picked in that range are going to be guys like Anton Salayev and Artem Levshunov, who I think are a lot more limited in what they'll be able to bring at their peaks than a player like Ivan Demidov. So I think he would be my pick at number 4 if it would, and he probably would be on the board still. Like I'd be pretty shocked if he goes top 3. I'd be very elated and happily surprised, but it would not be expected. So I think Demidov at 4 is a very reasonable and optimistic hope.
I would not be mad about it. But yeah, I agree. The Blue Jackets have a million defensemen, both NHL and prospect. I would like to see them draft a center, but I'm not like they should draft a center, like a less good center at risk of giving up on a more talented winger, if that makes sense.
Caden Lindstrom would be the one center that I would be really excited to snap up in that tier. Like if he's still on the board at 4, I'd also be very, very like if you can run Fantilli and Caden Lindstrom as your top 2 centers long term, that is disgusting.
Yeah, I would not be mad about that. Celebrini seems out of reach for the Blue Jackets right now, but never say never, you know. But I wouldn't be mad about Ivan Demidov coming to Columbus, because I think what you do is you put him and Kent Johnson and maybe Adam Fantilli on a line together and just watch them go. And that sounds like a pretty good time to me. And that's all I've got for today. Tomorrow we are going to check back in with the All-Stars. We're going to talk a bit about Jenna. We're going to talk a little bit about the AHL All-Star. We might have some interview stuff in there with Trevor Kolansky, Jack Reeves, and Jay Christensen, the All-Star reps here in San Jose. But like I said, that's all I've got for you today. So check back in tomorrow. Make us your first listen of the day every single day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube and on Sirius XM. And thank you for listening. I appreciate all of you guys always. You make this job very easy, even if the Blue Jackets make it difficult. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email us at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for making us your first listen of the day. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.